Hello, I'm Katherine Van Warmer. My hometown is New Orleans. Now that I'm retired, I spend my time writing new editions of books I wrote earlier. I want to express my gratitude to the Global Listening Center and the festival for hosting this conference, and to Sardul Singh for founding the Global Listening Center, which has brought people together from all over the world. My aim in this presentation is, after describing some of my personal background, to discuss the relevance of listening skills to the situation of the Gaza-Israeli war. Sometimes an event comes along of such magnitude that it makes other situations seem trivial in contrast. As a sociologist with a background in social work, I have an interest in studying conflict as a universal trait, but also I'm interested in studying relationships and what political disagreements do to these personal relationships. The brief articles I've written for the Global Listening Center all have to do with conflict of one sort or another. Listening to the survivors of racism based on my book, The Made Narratives, which is a collection of narratives from older African American women who had worked as maids in the Jim Crow South. My aim was to show how much we learn from such storytellers. Other articles I wrote for the GLC were one on listening to the earth with all its pollution and pesticides and fights for survival. Next, I turned to another form of conflict, and this is abortion. I wanted to look at how people could listen to each other on both sides of this. For me, it was fairly easy because I could have empathy on both sides if I got into a debate on this topic. The Israeli-Palestinian war offers a much greater challenge to me personally because as a pacifist, I oppose all war. This means I have to struggle to listen with empathy to supporters of any war or supporters of military spending or NATO and so on. From my perspective then, the strong emotions involved in the abortion debate pale alongside the issue of war. And this conflict does not seem to have any middle ground. It also doesn't seem to have a solution. I should say that earlier I lived in Northern Ireland, and this was during the Troubles, right before. And that was in the late 1960s to 1970. And there was division, extreme division based on religion on both sides. But there was a solution, and pretty well the solution was found. Here in this war, what's involved is religion and also entitlement to land and resources, and then, of course, politics. Religious hatred in the world is not new. In the late 1960s, at the beginning of the period later known to us as the Troubles, that was when I was a teacher in Northern Ireland. I really didn't have good listening skills or much empathy for people who were not on my side. I was a Protestant but my sympathies were on the side of Catholics, and I was teaching in a Protestant school. I would say my lack of listening skills because of that. I lost my job, but the good news was I came back to America. At first, after October the 7th, 2023, the world's sympathy was with the Israelis, and the outside attacks were on the Palestinians and Muslims as well. But as the media shifted focus to the destruction and killings in Gaza, anti-Semitism was on the rise. This was most noticeable in the U.S. on college campuses, where demonstrations against Israel are held. What is significant is the extent to which a war and political conflict in a faraway country can bring the issues home. The divisiveness in the U.S., as in Europe, over this issue is very strong. A survey from the Pew Research Center recently reveals that for Jews and Muslims living in the U.S., the level of distress over this Middle Eastern conflict is especially high. The survey of Muslims and Jews found that 1 in 4 in each group have lost relationships. They've broken up with people, never speaking to them again once this war had broken out. What if we, in discussing the conflict, would listen to each other? Would we then not feel the pain of the other in experiencing the loss of life, the hostages dying in captivity, the children surrounded or killed in the bombings, and the terrorism of Hamas? After a thorough investigation, the United Nations Commission states that both Hamas and Israel are guilty of war crimes. Social work teaches listening skills, drawing on the teachings of psychologist Carl Rogers, who famously defined the 3 key components of listening as empathy, unconditional positive regard, and genuineness. The foremost of these is empathy. Empathy is about grasping the other person's feelings of anger and fear and responding to them with your body language. It's also about intellectually getting yourself in the place of the other and feeling, even for a moment, their pain. And hopefully the other person will respond accordingly. The opposite of empathy is dehumanization. To prepare soldiers for combat, they're taught to dehumanize the enemy. And they're taught not to have empathy, or they couldn't kill the enemy. Now we look at choice of words today. The connotations to one side of the conflict may be entirely different to the other side. Empathy comes into play here in understanding how certain terms can trigger a psychological response that makes little sense without knowing the context. And the context may relate to a people's cultural history and their survival under horrific circumstances. A term's meaning may have historical implications and relate to intergenerational trauma. Both Palestinians and Jews are descended from people who endured the horrors of mass slaughter and ethnic cleansing. and historical trauma is a factor that drives extremist thoughts and politics on both sides of the issue. Examples of terms and slogans that are emotionally laden and thoughtlessly uttered by activists are Free Palestine, From the River to the Sea, genocide, and Zionism. Equating Palestinians with terrorism also should be avoided as well. In summary, there is no greater challenge to advocates of empathic listening than in wartime, when the stakes of winning or losing are so high and the people are so divided. The Global Listening Center is playing an important role in its conference and through its publications available on the website in peacemaking. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised when I searched online to check to see if there was any research linking listening skills to peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And what popped up but an article on narrative listening between Palestinians and Jews from Israel, an article published by the Global Listening Center by Rappaport and Wolvin. These authors describe a case study of News Story Leadership, an organization that brings together delegates from Israel and Palestine to Washington, D.C. each summer to share personal narratives with each other and with U.S. members of Congress. The stories invite empathy, but only if we listen. Thank you.